The order came in the middle of a tense summer, when the war in Europe felt balanced on a knife's edge. It was early August 1944, and the Allied armies had finally broken out of Normandy after weeks of brutal fighting. The beaches were behind them, the hedgerows were slowly being left behind, and for the first time since D-Day, the war began to move fast, very fast. And then something happened that even seasoned generals did not expect. In just 48 hours, one American army moved more than 100 miles across France. Tanks rolled day and night. Trucks clogged every road. Maps became outdated almost as soon as they were printed. When Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower heard the reports, he paused. He knew this moment. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. Would be remembered. What Eisenhower said next about General George S. Patton and his army revealed not just surprise, but a deeper truth about the kind of war they were now fighting. To understand why Eisenhower's reaction mattered, you have to go back a few weeks earlier to July 1944 in Normandy. The Allied invasion that began on June 6th had succeeded, but at a terrible cost. American, British and Canadian forces were stuck in narrow beachheads, fighting field by field against a stubborn German defence. The countryside of Normandy was broken into small farms, divided by thick hedgerows that blocked tanks and limited visibility. German units, many of them experienced veterans, used this terrain well. Progress was slow. Casualties were high. Morale was strained. Eisenhower, as Supreme Commander, felt the pressure every day. He had promised President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill that the invasion would succeed. Failure was not an option. By late July, Eisenhower approved a massive American offensive called Operation Cobra. It was planned and executed under General Omar Bradley, commander of the U.S. First Army. On July 25, 1944, near the town of St. Lo, hundreds of Allied bombers carpet-bombed German positions. The attack was not perfect. Some American troops were hit by friendly fire. But the effect on the German defence was devastating. Their lines cracked. For the first time, there was a real opening. Eisenhower knew that if this opening was not exploited quickly, the Germans would recover. Speed now mattered more than caution. This was the moment George S. Patton had been waiting for. Patton was one of the most famous and controversial generals of the war. He was bold, aggressive, and believed deeply in fast movement and constant attack. He also had a complicated relationship with Eisenhower. The two men had known each other since the interwar years. Eisenhower respected Patton's ability, but worried about his temper and discipline. Earlier in 1944, Patton had been sidelined after slapping 2 soldiers in Sicily the previous year. Eisenhower had defended him, but kept him out of the spotlight. For months, Patton was used as a decoy commander, leading a fake army in England to confuse German intelligence before D-Day. Now, finally, Eisenhower was ready to use him again. On August 1, 1944, the U.S. Third Army was officially activated, with Lieutenant General George S. Patton in command. The timing was critical. Bradley's First Army had broken through, and Patton's job was to pour through the gap and turn a breakthrough into a rout. Patton understood this better than anyone. He did not wait for perfect conditions. He did not wait for full supplies. He moved. Within hours of activation, Patton's units began pushing south and west from Normandy into Brittany and central France. His armoured division, supported by motorised infantry and artillery, drove hard. Roads that had seen little traffic for years were suddenly filled with columns of American vehicles. Drivers slept in their seats. Mechanics repaired tanks by the roadside. Officers navigated by memory when maps failed to keep up. Patton pushed his course commanders relentlessly. He demanded speed. He demanded initiative. He demanded results. Between August 4th and August 3rd, 1944, Patton's army advanced more than 100 miles in some sectors. This was not a single straight line, but a series of rapid thrusts that shattered German command and control. Towns like Avranches, Rennes, and Laval fell in quick succession. German units, already weakened, were unable to form new defensive lines. Many were cut off or forced to retreat in confusion. Prisoners were taken by the thousands. For the first time since the invasion, the Germans were not setting the pace. The Allies were. Reports of the advance flowed up the chain of command. Bradley received them first, then passed them to Eisenhower's headquarters. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, known as SHAEF, staff officers tracked the movement on large wall maps. Each update forced them to move coloured pins farther and farther east. Some officers thought there must be a mistake. Armies were not supposed to move this fast in Europe, not against a capable enemy, not after weeks of slow fighting. Eisenhower studied the reports carefully. He asked for confirmation. The confirmation came back the same. Patton had done it. Eisenhower's reaction was not anger and not disbelief, but a mix of admiration and calculation. He reportedly remarked that Patton was moving like a streak of lightning, a phrase that captured both the speed and the danger of the advance. Eisenhower understood that speed could win wars, but he also knew it could create serious problems. Supply lines were stretching thin. Fuel consumption was enormous. Ammunition was being used faster than it could be replaced. If Patton outran his support, his army could be exposed. Yet Eisenhower also understood something else. This was exactly the kind of momentum the Allies needed. The Germans were reeling. Their reserves were limited. Their leadership was divided. Adolf Hitler was interfering, directly in operational decisions, often making things worse. If the Allies kept pressure on, the German front in France might collapse completely. Eisenhower did not order Patton to slow down. Instead, he adjusted the overall Allied strategy to support the rapid advance. He allowed Patton to continue pushing east, even as British and Canadian forces fought their way south from Caen. This decision would soon lead to one of the most important battles of the campaign, the Falaise Pocket, where German forces were nearly encircled and destroyed in mid-August 1944. Behind the scenes, Eisenhower also made sure Patton understood the limits. He reminded him that discipline mattered, that coordination with other armies was essential. Eisenhower's leadership style was calm and steady, very different from Patton's fiery personality. But the two men complemented each other in this moment. Eisenhower set the broad direction. Patton delivered the speed. The famous movement of 100 miles in 48 hours was not just a number. It represented a shift in the nature of the war in Western Europe. For weeks, the Allies had fought a slow, grinding battle of attrition. Now, the war had become fluid. Units were maneuvering across open country. Decisions made at headquarters in the morning could change the situation on the ground by nightfall. Eisenhower recognized this shift immediately. In private, he later reflected that Patton's drive showed what American mechanized forces could achieve when properly unleashed. Patton himself was not surprised. He believed that this was how war should be fought. In his diary, he wrote about the joy of movement, the satisfaction of keeping the enemy off balance. But he also acknowledged the strain on his men and machines. Tanks broke down. Fuel shortages forced pauses. At times, Patton pushed his luck, ordering advances with barely enough gasoline to reach the next objective. It was a gamble that often paid off, but not without risk. As August continued, the consequences of that early August dash became clear. German forces west of the Seine River were shattered. Paris was liberated on August 25, 1944. The Allied armies raced toward the German border. Eisenhower's confidence grew, but so did his concern about logistics. By September, the Allies faced a new problem. They were advancing faster than their supply system could support. The very success Patton had demonstrated now created new challenges. Looking back, historians often focus on what Eisenhower said because it reveals his understanding of leadership. He did not try to rein in Patton out of jealousy or fear. He recognized talent and used it, while still maintaining overall control. Eisenhower once said that Patton was at his best when he could run free within clear boundaries. The 100-mile advance was proof of that idea. The moment also became part of Patton's legend. Soldiers told stories of endless convoys, of sleeping by the road, of French civilians cheering as American tanks rolled through towns that had been occupied for 4 years. For many of those soldiers, the speed of the advance made them believe, for the first time, that the war might actually end. Eisenhower never forgot that moment. Years later, he would speak about the importance of exploiting success in war, of recognizing when the enemy is vulnerable and acting without hesitation. The lesson of Patton's dash across France stayed with him long after the war was over. In the end, what Eisenhower said was less important than what he did. He trusted his commander. He adjusted his strategy. He let momentum build. And in those 48 hours, the direction of the war in Western Europe changed forever. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.